Oak 93.5. I'm Staff.
Respect. That's what we all need to give each other. And I am 100% confident that this world would be a much better place than what it is today. Welcome to another edition of Meaningful Conversations with Dr. L. And I am your host, Dr. L. And as always, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank those of you who have followed us since the beginning. As I always say, we're in the process of building something great, a platform where we can have honest dialogue, open dialogue, candid dialogue about things that matter, things that leave us better than what we were before we entered into the meaningful conversation, things that inspire us, that lift us up, that help us look at how we are moving in this world and help us to evaluate whether or not we're making significant contributions that are going to make this world a better place, whether or not we are making room at our respective tables for everyone, being inclusive, whether or not we are, as a Christian, I will say, living the lessons that Jesus taught, as opposed to preaching the lessons that you interpret through your translations or interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. And that's a whole nother story, not our focus for tonight. But really, Meaningful Conversations is a platform. It's a platform that challenges us to think and to act and to be in a higher frequency and vibration than where we currently are. And this month, many of you know, is Pride Month. And so I could not let the month end without inviting to be a guest on this show, Meaningful Conversations, which is a Savage Bull Entertainment production. Someone that I consider a very good friend of mine, someone who every time she talks, she drops some kernels of wisdom, some instruction, some lessons that have made me better, have made me think about things in a very different way than what I was taught to think about them growing up, and especially growing up in a conservative Christian family faith. There is room at the end. There should be room at the end for us all. And also, recognizing our humanity. And what does that mean, right? What does it mean when you shun certain groups, but you demand that the group you represent is given, a priority or a lot of attention and respect? RESPECT. So tonight on the show, I have the phenomenal Miss Candis Cox. So let me tell you a little bit about who she is. I like I said, I simply adore her and have learned so much from her. But let me just share a little bit about her bio, or her background from her bio. And how y'all think?
No.
Yes. I have to, for the people who are like, who is Candis Cox? If they don't know, they gonna know after tonight. And so, but I do want to just share a little bit about this. And I was getting ready to say, y'all, and these headsets are messing up my afro. I took out my braids and I'm trying to go natural, do the whole natural thing. And I'm trying to learn it. And I had to pick in the car, picking it out. And I was like, oh Lord, honey, I don't think I could. He's like, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be tight. It's supposed to be. And I'm like, oh Lord, I don't know how much longer we're gonna do this. I might have to get out the flat irons again. But Candis Cox is a gender and sexuality educator. She's a lecturer and advocate for the LGBTQ community in Raleigh, North Carolina, and actually all over the state. Where she lives with her husband. And actually, I know they have moved. They no longer live in Raleigh. But she's also an advocate and well-known internationally. And originally, she's from Syracuse, New York. She relocated to Raleigh to attend North Carolina State University, where she obtained a BA in sociology. Go Wolfpack and go sociologists. I used to teach undergraduate sociology courses at North Carolina State University, as well as North Carolina Central Eagle Pride. Originally, she was scheduled to attend Campbell Law School, and instead, she chose to focus on becoming her authentic self, completing her gender transition in 2003. And you know what? I've read your bio so many times, and I don't know how I missed that Campbell Law School piece, but I'm just zoning it to, capturing that part. And I'm like, wow, how did I know that? I don't think I knew that. See, I told you I learned something new every time I talk to her or about her.
I did.
I
I did.
Wow.
I started that journey, and then
Wow.
I stopped, and I did go on educationally in other realms after
Yeah.
that. But yeah.
Cool. Well, let me finish this because it's well put together. It's all on her Facebook. I mean, her website, which you can find and read and look at her beautiful pictures. The photographs of her are just simply out of this world. It puts me to shame. And especially, I wish you could see her, but she's under the weather tonight, so she is not going to come on video. But absolutely gorgeous. And I'm gonna have to have you come back with your stylist to do a tutorial on makeup because I could use a few lessons. But anyway, until early 2016, she worked as a customer experience representative and compliance resolution officer with American Airlines. And since 2008, she has been a guest lecturer for the North Carolina Community College System and UNC College System, working to help educate students and staff on transgender women's, LGBT, and minority issues in society and the workplace. Since 2012, Candice has expanded her lectures to include numerous business and health care agencies to further increase visibility, understanding, and support for the LGBT community. She's worked with several nonprofits raising money for the LGBT community and organizations that support the LGBTQ community, as well as HIV/AIDS treatment and research. She serves on numerous boards, including on the board of directors for Equality NC. She works for Human Rights Campaign, HRC, and she is, a public speaker. She just goes around. So y'all go on. She was instrumental she was the only transgender person to have met with with former Governor Pat McCrory to discuss his anti-LGBT bathroom bill that we all know of in North Carolina as House Bill 2. And Candice also made history in being the first transgender woman to walk the final look in a fashion show when she walked the runway in the NCFA Style Week fashion show in Charlotte, North Carolina, wearing a custom dress designed by Tumblr and Tipsy's Michael Kaluva. The dress was designed to represent the transgender flag with alternating white, pink, white, blue on the skirt and equality with the yellow bodice. So there's so much more to learn about her. So since we have her on Meaningful Conversations, I say we just get right on into the conversation. So how you doing?
I am so good, and thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
I am so sorry for you and your listeners. Allergies have just been killing me,
Yeah.
and I couldn't come, anything but correct. And
Yeah.
um,
Of course.
I'm so like stuffy, and my nose is all red, and I was like, ooh, not cute look.
That's okay,
Um,
girl, because we don't step out unless we stepping right. At least, I mean, I know you don't. I do sometimes. It's like, I'm just going
no,
out.
you never do. You
Please.
never do. But
Please.
as African Americans on the whole, we don't and we can't,
That's true.
because
That's true.
unfortunately for us, our resume, is read oftentimes before we actually get to open our mouths.
Isn't that? You better
So,
talk. You better talk. You better say the good stuff. Save it, because you're absolutely right. I got my little lipstick right here and all this stuff. But so tell us. I just read your bio, and I asked this of all of my listeners. My guests. Who is Candis Cox? Beyond that bio, beyond that quite impressive bio, tell us a little bit about who you are, your background. Tell us about growing up. We know you're from Syracuse, but just tell us a little something that we would never get from the bio that really epitomizes or speaks to who you are in your journey.
yeah. So I always tell people I was born in Syracuse to a Southern family, and I grew up in the South. I actually spent a majority of my formative years in North Carolina, and from the coast to the mountains, I lived all of it. And North Carolina is and always will be home for me, and a place that I feel a very close connection with, and take a lot of pride in. Like I'm very proud of my state.
Yeah.
Um, but Yeah, I got to grow up in this beautiful state, and I got to grow up with an amazing mother who moved here to make a better life for herself as a single Black woman who ha- did not have a choice in getting pregnant, but chose to keep the child, and had dropped out of college but wanted to do something better. And so she came and she went back to college at North Carolina Central University as a
Eagle
Mark Scholar,
pride. Eagle pride. Yeah.
and then went on as the first African American woman to then go to then Bowman Gray School of Medicine, Wake
Mm.
Forest, and did her residency in Greenville. And I grew up with that and that strength and a lot of love. And I got to see so much. And, it's funny, you say how you grew up in that conservative and religious background. And I oftentimes am proud of
Mm-hmm.
that background and that community that I got to grow up in that I don't think it's conservative. I think it is something that's grounded in tradition
Yeah.
and something that values a person's integrity and above all else. And that was always my takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
And religion, I'm a strong and proud Christian. So I always tell people, like, it was not your faith that has ever given you misgivings about LGBTQ plus people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jesus made it very clear that, all are created equal in his eye, in his father's eyes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we have is never with our Lord and his teachings. It's always with our interpretation of said teachings. And that's usually where our issue comes in. So yeah, I I'm always proud of all of that. But who I am is none of the things on that resume or any of that. I'm a daughter, I'm a granddaughter, I'm a wife, I am someone who tries to be a good community member, you know. I care a lot about issues like the LGBTQIA plus, but I also care a lot about people who are homeless. I try to exercise empathy with people who are in different positions. I try to constantly push myself to give more and to
Mm-hmm.
give to those who need help. And help, can come in many forms, because one thing I can tell you is that throughout my life and my family's life, you never know when you meet someone where they're at. You
Right.
don't know where they came from and you don't know where they're going,
That's right. That's right.
you know?
Yep.
So the only thing that you can do is you can ask yourself, if this is my only interaction with this person, how do I want to play into the narrative of their life?
Right.
Do I want to be that positive memory, that one person who cared, that one person who stopped, that one person who gave them that $1 that may have made a difference that you cannot fathom? I always think of, that for the want of a nail, it's like the smallest things can have the biggest impact. And
That's right.
so I try to always be aware of that when my words and my actions, every moment of my life.
Can we stay with the impact and how one person or one event can have a transformative impact on someone's life? I want to go back um to young Candis Cox growing up, and in a world that does not and still does not allow people to be whomever they want to be. Talk about when you first decided that the body you was born into was not that was not you, that was not what you wanted to be or represent, and how you reconciled what the world expected with what you wanted, as a Black person and especially in the South. Oh, good gracious. Um, in the Bible Belt, right? In the seat of racism, right? The heart of it. Talk about that, because some of our viewers may have children or they themselves may still be struggling with that. And, was it a person who said, look, be whatever you want to be? Ain't nobody thinking about, what folk or society is saying. What was it? So take us through that a little bit.
So, one, I first realized that I had been born with the wrong plumbing, if you will, into the
Right.
into the wrong body when I was 6 years old, which is very textbook. So people oftentimes question when they hear of young children, who are exploring their gender expression and gender identity, and they're too young. No, that's not the case. We actually know from a scientific point of view that 5 to 7 years old is when we have that realization of understanding our own gender identity and expression and everything. So it was at that age. Unfortunately, I was not blessed with the short gene. So I shot up like a sprout. And growing up, I looked like an L. I was tall and skinny with long feet. And being a girl was just not something that was on my radar. I think that being an African American helps us and hurts us sometimes when our authentic selves is different from the norm or what we're given, because we are fatalist by default. We learn to accept things as they are oftentimes. We understand what it means to want. We know how to live with desire and having desire unfulfilled.
Dreams deferred, right? Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred, right? We're used to that.
Yeah. What happens to it is it turns into, a generational thing that we pass on and on and on, and that we learn to make it through life, and that's the position I found myself in.
Right.
And I was very fortunate to have a mother who was progressive enough to say, I see the struggle that you're going through. I went through a lot of self-exploration journeys before I came to terms with who I was. I joined the military. I went to college. I moved to Australia. I lived on a remote island.
Wow.
Like I did all of that in a very short period of time. And all of it was because I was chasing after something that wasn't actually there, because what I was doing was I was trying to find something that I could live with while living something that was not me. I thought, I hate being a boy. I'm not a boy. So if I join the military, where I will be forced to be a boy, that will help me come to terms.
Wow.
And that's not what happened.
Right.
I will also just say for every single listener, I loved the military. If I could join back up again right now, I would. I believe that everybody should have to serve their country, because it will give you a newfound appreciation for the freedoms that we experience.
Well, we serve, just not in the, the military.
Well, and not the military per se, but like in Israel, where everyone has to serve.
Oh Lord, please don't bring up
capacity.
Israel as an example right now for anything.
Just in a public capacity. Everyone has to serve in a public capacity for a couple of years, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But as a boy, it wasn't working so hot, because I was okay with my dress blues. I just really wanted to put on a fierce set of stilettos.
Right.
And honestly, I realized that it was me fearing other people judging me. And it was my fear that I would not have a life worth living, because all I saw was the mistreatment that people who were, anything different. I had mistakenly identified as gay. That was bad enough. I had an uncle who was HIV positive, which turned to AIDS. I saw how he was treated. And I knew of what I then thought, this was a long time ago, I just had them referred to as cross-dressers. And I saw the life that they lived. And it's not a life that I wanted. My mother, she said, I have expectations.
When did you come to this this realization about your identity? And before you go there, I want to read a quote that James Baldwin, right? How can we not bring James Baldwin into this conversation? But James Baldwin is quoted, and he wrote this back around late 1940s, not 1940s, back around the 1970s. So identity would seem to be the garment with which one covers the nakedness of the self, in which case it is the best that the garment be loose, a little like the robes of the desert, through which one's nakedness can always be felt and sometimes discerned. This trust in one's nakedness is all that gives one the power to change one's robe. And I looked for this quote because as you were talking about, I just, when I came to the realization that this is just not, I don't want to wear this. I don't want to wear this. When did you come to this realization that took you down to this identity, this liberation path?
When I was 23.
23?
23. 23 years old. And it was my mother. She helped me a lot. She said, you're searching for something and I don't know what it is, but you need to find it because you're just not happy. And the point of life is to not be so miserable.
Right.
And I said, something to the effect of, well, what if it was being a girl? And she said, well, when you were 6 years old, you thought that you were a girl. And if that's what you're telling me it takes for you to actually get on with your life and start living your life and stop running from pillar to post, she said, then we'll explore that.
What were you doing? What? I mean, you don't have to go into any too deep, but
at that time,
that made her say, "Look, something's got to give. You need to get yourself together." Because all moms, I think, have that conversation with or parents.
I had left college. I had left the military. I had lived in Australia, which cost my parents a pretty penny for me to live there for that year. I came back. I lived on Ocracoke Island. I was working, but I was burning up money. I had a summer job that I stopped working at, and I just was not living up to my potential, and I had no direction. And I think for my mother, it was just a breaking point. She was just tired of every conversation with me about the future, because I was at that age where your parents are like, what are you doing with your life? And it was, I had no, I saw nothing past tomorrow.
Right. What about people? There's this belief that persons who struggle with their sexual identity, that there's some trauma underneath, there's some bad experience underneath, that they're not, quote, born that way, that something happened. So especially you hear this sort of false, I think, critique, or let me say faulty, because in some instances it might be true, it may not be false. This critique that's spurious, full of holes. As you hear it particularly among Christians who say God made male and female. You've heard that. What is it? God made Adam and Eve, not all those nasty.
God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Yeah, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So, what do you say to people who come from that belief?
God made Adam, and then Eve came from Adam, first of all. So, that's what God said. Also, what do I tell people? Well, I'm a scholar, so I always challenge people to say, please don't come at me quoting the Bible
Right.
unless you're actually quoting the Bible before King James interpreted it so that it would fit within his ideal and his way
You
of
can't see me,
controlling a
but can you hear
population.
this? Can you hear this? That's a snap. You can't see.
I can, because
Okay.
I'm like, so first and foremost, let's get it correct, okay?
Right.
Because the English interpretation doesn't even align. Okay, so let's get that out of the way, first of all. Second of all, don't start picking and choosing what things you're going to say our creator has actually handed down and said what you may and may not do. Because if you're going to hold me accountable for living my life by the literal tenements of the Bible, then I'm going to expect you to not wear two garments that are not made of the same material. I'm going to expect you to not plant crops side by side that are not of the same. I'm like, let's just not go there, okay? Because not one of us is without sin. And as far as something traumatic happening in my life that made me want to do this, I always challenge people and I say, okay, tell me something traumatic that happened in your life. So I'll say to you, Dr. L, tell me something traumatic that happened in your life, in your childhood.
Right.
That made you be a heteronormative woman who identifies as straight. I'm like, nothing traumatic happened in my life that made me be transgender. I mean, did I get everything I wanted for every Christmas? No. So maybe that's what it was.
Right.
So
that's a myth.
No,
so that's
I didn't have anything.
Busted.
Furthermore, we know. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's a complete misgiving. And if people really want to go there, we know that there is a rough estimate that says that 3 out of 6 African-American children in this country will experience some level of sexual assault before the age of 18. 3 out of 6, that's half. So if that is a true statistic, that means that half of every Black person in this country is going to grow up to be gay or transgender as a result of the traumatic experience that happened to them in their childhood. And that is simply not true.
That's right. And so because as a Christian, it's important for the church to be woke, I believe, and especially during this particular time. And you touched on something about King James, right? So I always challenge people to dig deeper than what you learn in Sunday school, to really unpack, to go deep into the Holy Scriptures and to understand that King James had an agenda, right? And so I'm not discrediting, and the Bible is what I stand on. But I am saying that you bring up a good point about us studying and understanding from a scholarly basis, right? Not just a religious. And religion has destroyed many kingdoms and homes and communities. So let me just say that the slave masters used religion to justify what they were doing, right? And so slaves, obey your master and all that. So when we get it to that part in the scripture, nobody's unpacking that the same way they unpack homosexuality, LGBTQ identities. So I'm glad you brought that up. So one thing from this meaningful conversation, listeners and Facebook viewers, is start doing go deeper and get a better understanding of of what God's word not only says, but what Jesus, if you are Christian, that's the pinnacle, that's the core foundation of our faith, is Jesus's life and teachings. Christianity came online after Jesus was killed, was crucified, after he was buried, rose from the dead, ascended. So Christianity comes online after that. Before, we know Jesus was Jewish. And so I challenge people to even learn more about the Jewish faith so you can understand the context from which a lot of this happened. So I think you handled that well. Let's talk about, this is Pride Month. A lot of people don't know about what this all means. They think it's rainbow flags and, people having parties in the street. So give us a little history on Pride Month. Talk about Stonewall, and then I want to talk about the ACT UP movement and my opinions about some of that. And one is Black folk in that movement, or LGBTQ folk, were left out financially, and it really benefited and caught attention
in the LGBTQ movement.
I would say the gay. Well, first the gay, because it started right, white gay males acting up, bringing attention to HIV. Oh, okay. Well, educate us. No. So I'm miseducated. So educate us about. Give us the history, Pride, and start with Stonewall.
So, I
know Sylvester and all them were active, but go ahead.
Pride Month is the month of June. And here is exactly what happened. So in New York City, there was a nightclub called the Stonewall Inn. In New York City, sodomy, all of that was illegal at the time. The Stonewall Inn was actually run by the mafia, who would intentionally invite the police in. And if you were dressed as a woman, that was illegal, and you could be arrested. And so all of the trans women and the drag queens, they would get arrested, they would get beat up all the time, and the mafia allowed it, but then also profited off of the community. What happened is that day was oh my gosh, what, I'm blanking on her name. The Wizard of Oz. What was her name? The actress?
Oh, black hair. Yeah, go ahead. I'm trying.
Julie.
Yeah. Who was Dorothy?
Liza Minnelli's mother. Oh my gosh.
Dorothy.
I'm completely blanking.
Go ahead.
I'm like, I'll have to look it
Judy
up.
Garland.
Thank you, Judy Garland. Okay, thank you. Whew. So Judy Garland, the day that the Stonewall riots happened was the day of Judy Garland's funeral.
Oh.
And it was considered very sad and traumatic for the LGBTQ plus community, because Judy Garland was very pro-gay when it was not a fad. And a sidebar fun fact, oftentimes our good friends, we will refer to as our good Judy. That comes from gay lingo. That's how gay guys would identify their other gay friends. They would refer to them as their good Judies, which they got from Judy Garland.
Wow.
And gay men were referred to as being a friend of Dorothy.
So we've got our good Judys and we got our bad Karens. So now
yes.
All right. So to Karen and Judy, don't get them mixed up, because they are not the two of the same. Carry on and teach us.
That night, the police were brought in to riot, and people had enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just that. It was, we have to look at the time. This is the late 1960s. People had enough. We had President Kennedy. We had Dr. King. We had Bobby Kennedy. We had all of these leaders and icons around us dying and being buried, while those who they stand up for, the disenfranchised, just keep getting beat down.
Mm-hmm.
And there was enough. And it was a black trans woman by the name of Marsha P. Johnson who threw the first brick at Stonewall. And she was the one who said, enough is enough.
Wow.
And then it was a Hispanic queen who came behind her and said, enough is enough.
Okay.
And they are the ones who started fighting back with the police.
Wow.
That night.
So that is something different than what thank you. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Keep going.
It absolutely is. And they have to sell a different narrative. And the reason that they have to sell a narrative that it was whites is because it was later on whites who started the actual New York City Pride, if you will, in the 70s.
Notice how I keep wanting to get into ACT UP, but go ahead.
And we're going to get there.
Okay, go ahead.
It was them who started it, and a great way for them to get people to rally behind them was they had to actually have done something other than just show up and have an event. So
Right.
they had to sell the narrative that they were the ones who threw the first stone. They were the ones who incited a riot and fought against the New York City police. And so support me. And they did that. And then as we move into the 80s, we had a lot of people dying. And it was minorities who were dying first. And we didn't know why. And then it was minorities. It was actually lesbians who, were fighting on the front line, if you will, in healthcare and everything. And they saw what was happening to these poor people, that they were just, getting a diagnosis and dropping over dead in a matter of weeks. And we do nothing. The government wouldn't help them. The president refused to actually call it by its name on television. And so they were the ones who really said, let's create this thing, act up, fight back, fight AIDS.
Right.
And it was really about a movement. And for me, the gay movement, if you will, and I get pushback from this, but it's not a new movement. The gay movement really attached itself to the civil rights movement. Because for me, the civil rights movement, especially as a Black person, I celebrate Juneteenth stronger than I celebrate Pride Month.
Why? Why?
Because without my freedom, you and I both would not be sitting here having this conversation.
That's right.
Plain and simple. I'm
right. Right.
If I wasn't free, you wouldn't be asking me at what age. No one asked a slave at what age they identified with being a slave.
Right. But we have
for me,
this...
Juneteenth.
Yeah, go ahead.
Says a lot more, and I think that LGBTQ plus people, because it was the minority LGBTQ plus people who were the ones who were actually doing the work. That's why I say they attached and aligned themselves under the civil rights movement, because they were already fighting that civil rights fight. They were already fighting because of their race.
So, Candiss,
and it was adding on the other components of who they were.
So this is the problem I have, and I actually wrote an article that I need to get published before the end of this month. This is where I am. It seems though the ones that benefited, the organizations that benefited, especially with the ACT UP movement, the whole quilts on the National Mall, and bringing attention to HIV/AIDS, and the organizations that seemed to benefit were largely white, gay, male organizations that got a lot of press, in a sympathetic way. And it just didn't seem to the press coverage during that time sort of some parts of that. And I tell people that's like talking about the civil rights movement when there were actual multiple movements, but civil rights movements. So it's plural and it's never singular when we talk about fighting for rights and civil rights and human rights. So am I wrong to, you've got a lot of wealthy, gay, white men who benefited. You got a lot of children from wealthy families that seem to have been the impetus for Congress and other donors to pour money into HIV/AIDS research, at least. And I think it's because the face of it initially that sparked the national attention were white gay men. They weren't, I don't think it was people dying in Harlem.
Take away the gay.
In Harlem.
Take away the gay. Take away the gay.
You're saying white men, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
In this country, if you want money, all you need to do is put a white man, because that is the qualifier. That is what gets you in the room. Because you can, if I weren't transgender, if I were gay, I could butch it up, dress it up, play it up, and be like, I'm not gay, not any of those things. I'd still be a Black man. I'd still be a George Floyd. I still would be someone who is, you know, just the lowest rung of society.
Right.
And as a Black woman, it's the same thing.
Right.
It's like, when you take all the qualifiers away and you leave me with what, as my grandmother says, I came in this way and I will die. I'm like, it doesn't matter. So of course it's always going to be the white men
so
who
going
get
back
everything.
So going back, you think race trumps gender and sexual identity?
Oh, absolutely.
Got it. Listen to these statistics from the Trevor Project. So Black LGBTQ youth experience rates of depressed mood and suicidality similar to all LGBT youth. However, it's higher among, so 66% of Black LGBT youth compared to all. When you throw everybody, 71%. So it's higher when you disaggregate by race. 35% of Black youth who identify as LGBTQ youth have considered suicide. 19%, which is higher than the general LGBTQ youth population of 18%, have attempted suicide. What's going on there?
A lack of acceptance within a race. The social stigmas that are placed upon us. It is, we don't have an outlet for African Americans to be anything but a shining symbol of excellence for our race. And that means that you're not gay, you're not transgender, you are Christian, hardworking, educated, you marry another Black person, and you make more Black people to be equal contributing members of our beautiful Black society. And if you are not doing that, no matter what you're doing, you're a problem. We shun you. We shun you so much so that we don't care that we put you in prison alongside the criminals and the thieves and the thugs, because for us, all of you are the same. You are hurting our race.
We hang you on the cross in between a thief, the robber and the thief, right? Like Jesus, right? We hang them to the cross. We crucify our own. What is your message to Black community members and Black faith leaders to help us begin to address the high rates of suicidal ideation, as well as attempts, as well as successes among Black LGBTQ youth, and also mental health, high prevalence of depression? What's your message? What do we need to do differently?
We need to remove the stigma on mental health within the African American community. It is, my family will talk about my cousin who's in prison for murder before we will talk about any mental health issues. And that is a true fact that I will call out of my own family. And I think that almost every African American family can agree and kind of identify with that. For us, mental health, no, we don't experience it. Not only do we not talk about it, we don't experience it. We don't name it. We don't own it. It is not something that we go through, because depression is not a real thing. Depression is something that comes along with white privilege and money and wealth. We ain't got time to be depressed.
That's what that's the belief.
That's what we think.
That's what we think, right? Okay. Yeah.
We have to actually make mental health something that it is okay to talk about, because suicide is not indicative of being LGBTQ IA plus. That suicide is sign of mental health and a mental health trauma experience. That means that person went and was going untreated, undiagnosed, unhelped. And I do look to us and our community. You cannot pray away depression. You cannot just shove everything down. And more younger generations are finding the angst of living as a Black person in this country with the inequality harder and harder and harder. Older generations, it's easier. The closer you were, I always tell people, the closer your generation was to slavery, the easier it is for you to live as a second-class citizen. The further you get away from slavery, the harder it is for you to understand this concept that you are just inherently less than everybody else.
So, do you believe that LGBTQ rights is this generation's civil rights fight?
I think that they think it is.
They think it is. What do you mean?
They think it is.
They think so it's not?
I'm still waiting on my 40 acres and a mule.
You like, forget all that. Y'all forget all, this my business here, what I'm doing right here. But this other stuff, wealth inequality, killing us in the streets, black men, and particularly with a bullseye, the income gap, all that's the fight. That's your fight. You're like, y'all stay out of my business and let me, I'm married who I love. I'm doing what I do for me. Y'all stay out of my business, stay out of my bedroom. But let's get to working on some other issues. So is that sort of where you are?
Being transgender is something that I was born. It's who I am.
Yeah, and it's nobody's business, right? Nobody asked me.
It isn't. And
right,
it has nothing to do with what country I was born into or anything.
Right.
It just is what it is. It's in me. It's in my DNA. Black people in this country are not here because they wanted a better life. And so they laid down and hopped on board a ship and came here. Black people were here because we were forced to be here. And we have been forced. We are an actual example of a forced societal group. We were forced into it, and we have been forced to then stay underfoot. So all equality for me originates with how we treat our African-American community. What we do, the service that we provide to them, and the opportunity that we create for them to actually make up for the fact that we brought you here in shackles. We divided your family. We created a caste system, but we're not British, so we don't think of ourselves as having created a caste system, but we did. We gave a premium based on the color of your skin and your hair texture. We have created all of that. And until we make it right and we actually experience racial equality in this country, the rest of it doesn't really matter, because you cannot tell me I'm okay with you being gay, but you are still a N-word. Like, it doesn't work that way.
No, right. And that's the fight we all need to be in together. By the way, white allies, everybody together, because you're absolutely right. We've got to figure out how to dismantle this caste system. And that's part of, I think the challenge before us. I want to ask you, the trans, lesbian, gay, the LGBTQ plus community or communities have made some progress. So do you see things changing in terms of gender equality and...
From a policy standpoint?
Yeah, just in society in general.
No.
You don't?
Okay. Oh, in society in general, yes, absolutely. And that has everything for me to do with pop culture and pop culture acceptance. That's where all equality comes from. More people viewed African Americans differently because of the Cosbys than because of Dr. King. And that's just a fact of life. Because you can ignore the message that Dr. King, if you just don't go to the march and you didn't listen to that radio station, but everybody likes entertainment. And you turning on the Cosby Show shows you a different view of African Americans than what you thought. And that changed everything. And that's the same thing. And it's true for all movements. So pop culture has really, RuPaul's Drag Race, having trans people, Candis and Laverne Cox, and all of these people in people's living room, and people actually just seeing it and getting to like face something that they just had this boogeyman concept that has made the progress.
Right. So we know what happened. What is it? Pulse? Was it Pulse nightclub? We know what happened.
Pulse nightclub in Orlando.
And they're making that are they making that a national monument of some sort? Yeah. So that's great. there are real reasons that you should be afraid, but I've never
Yes.
seen you show up like you are scared of anything. And that's because we're always in good trouble. So we ain't in, places where that should be. But what makes you afraid? Are you still do you still deal with any, or do you deal with any fears based on you living your authentic self?
Yes. Yes.
What
Um,
makes you, was it Pulse or was it, yeah.
no, no. What makes me scared is when other minorities turn their back
Mm,
on me, or disown or disenfranchise me, or are the ones who actually need to make fun of me to lift themselves up.
mm,
That scares me the most, because when they come for me, when that harm is there, I should be able to turn to my own people
right.
for help. And if you are the ones who are inflicting the pain,
Mm,
that means
mm.
I don't have anyone else to turn to. And that scares me, because
Wow.
everybody needs that community and that support.
That's right. Wow. Yeah. So, I often say we've worked too hard to build down, to tear down walls of oppression and racism for us to be the ones to erect them within our own community. So everybody in their own, in their tribe, in the community that birthed them, should feel a sense of safety and comfort, no matter who they are, no matter what they've, what the societal perception is of them. We should not become that which we are fighting so hard um, to challenge and to get rid of, the racists and people who discriminate. Stigma, by any other
Yeah.
word, to use Hannah, an advocate, a NAMI member down in Fayetteville who advocates hard for her and her daughter. She said, we need to call it what it is. Stigma ain't nothing but discrimination. So you can use the fancy name stigma, she says, but it ain't nothing but discrimination. And that's true. So we got a lot of work to
It
do.
is. It is.
We
And
got
I
a
tell
lot.
people, I don't ask you for understanding. You don't need, if you don't understand it,
Yeah,
let's talk about it. That's fine.
right,
Because that I'm not here for you,
right,
okay? Like
right,
I didn't do this for you.
right,
But I do ask for respect,
right,
because I'm still a human being.
right.
I'm a transhuman, but I'm a human being, and we all deserve the same thing. We all are here by our creator,
That's right.
and we all have this one life on this earth, and we all owe it to one another to ensure that each other
Right.
actually have the opportunity to realize something that is worth living and meaningful and measurable,
That's right.
because it is not up to us, to
That's right.
judge and
And let
to
me tell you
determine
this.
who's right and wrong.
Let me tell you this. People know me. I'm non-judgmental in a big way. One, because it ain't, I always say, that ain't none of your business. That's not my business. That ain't your business. What I do, in my house ain't none of your business, unless I let you in and ask your opinion about it or whatever and make it your business. And I'm more concerned, especially with when I minister from the pulpit. I hate that word preach, because it's like, but when I minister from the pulpit, I'm more concerned that people who I know are sitting in the pews, dealing with a mental health issue, dealing with a substance use issue, young girls who are scared to go home because they're being molested by a family member in the home,
Mm-hmm.
wives who smile and are on the usher board but are being beat by their husbands, husbands
Mm-hmm.
who are pastoring and leading flock but are going to the strip club or picking up sex workers, all that stuff. So don't come to me to talk about why are y'all letting LGBTQ folk in here, and why are you listening to them? What, seriously? And so yeah. So for me, it's, let's figure out how we can make the world a better place, how we can address poverty, how we can feed the poor, how we can, tear down this corrupt and unjust justice system and build something else. All of these issues, how we can help people who need mental health treatment, get mental health treatment in their communities without prisons and jails becoming our default mental health and substance use recovery centers. So real quickly,
and you
we
can
got
let anybody in that church.
Yeah,
let anybody
right.
in that church.
Whatever,
because remember, he said, wherever
let
people
whosoever will
name,
let them come. And so listen to this. What message would you give young people? And we got to run through this real quickly. 2 minutes. What message would you give to young people who want to live, who are not living in as they want to live? Whatever that, however that is,
no matter how
LGBTQ.
hard it is in your mind, trust me when I tell you, it's worth it to live hard but happy with who you are than to live easy and hate yourself.
That's right. And what message would you give to your younger self? What would you tell a younger you?
Wear a lot less makeup.
Okay, all right. And what gives you?
When I first started out, girl, I was a hot mess.
Well, you always look beautiful. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? This conversation.
Oh,
your listeners.
Yeah.
Your listeners gives me hope. What gives me hope is what I don't know and don't see.
Wow. Thank you.
Because I have my faith.
And you hold on to your faith. Hold on to those who love you. Keep doing what you're doing. You are a shining light. We need your voice. We need you. I love you. Thank you so much. Thank everybody for tuning in to another segment or edition of Meaningful Conversations with Dr. L. Follow me on Twitter, Michelle Laws 7. Twitter handle, Jesus Take the Wheel. Yes. And then, or on Instagram, Michelle Laws 007. I will talk to you next Thursday. You can replay this on YouTube in a few days or maybe a week or so. Follow us on YouTube. Remember to subscribe. We're trying to build something, y'all, and I need your help. Peace and blessings. Respect each other. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And do this. Mind your own business. Mind your business. And let's do the work that we know we need to do to help the poor, people with mental illness, substance use, homeless. The list goes on and on. Peace and blessings.